Hello everybody and welcome back to Fintech Week London. I'm Tyler from the Fintech Times and right now I'm very happy to be joined by Leda Glyptis. Leda, how are you?
I'm great and good to be back with you guys.
Thank you very much for sitting down with us today.
My pleasure.
Are you enjoying the event so far? It's quite early days.
It's early, but so far I've had my hair done by Ali Patterson, which was an unexpected bonus, and he's ready for a career change if he needs it.
Oh, fantastic.
And I did my keynote on a topic very close to my heart, which was followed by a brilliant panel. So far, it's been really good.
Oh, good. Well, yes, it's very exciting. There's lots of things to talk about, of course. But before we get on to that, we must give our viewers a chance to find out a bit more about who you are. So why don't you tell us a bit about who you are and where you come from today?
Of course. Well, I am Leda Glyptis. I'm the Chief Client Officer of 10x Banking. 10x is a cloud-native core banking provider. We really do believe that we're looking at a well-known problem and approaching it very, very differently. I'm very excited about the work we do, the clients we work with. And myself, as well as many of our leadership team, are what I'd like to call recovering bankers. We've sort of been in the industry a long time. We've seen the challenges, the opportunities, the capabilities from both sides, and we're really committed to creating the change that we believe in. Our founder is Anthony Jenkins, who's very much a veteran of the space, and he always says we're building the technology he wishes he had when he was the CEO of a big bank, and I find that describes what we're trying to do really well.
Fantastic. Well, you must have an incredible oversight into the industry with all those minds swirling about in one company. How exciting!
It is very good.
How exciting! Well, thank you very much for that introduction. You mentioned that you've been very busy this morning. You came off of your embedded finance panel just now, really, almost just before this interview, hot off the press. What can you tell us about? I mean, embedded finance, of course, it's massive and it's only going up. What can you tell us about the future of the technology and from your perspective?
So what I find interesting and what I was talking about in my keynote is that embedded finance is all of a sudden on everyone's mind. Everyone is talking about it, everyone is trying to get in on the train as it sort of leaves the station, and as you say, we're only at the beginning of this. But what is interesting is that the pieces of the puzzle that are needed to make embedded finance even possible have been in the making for the last 15, 20 years. The way we think about technology, the way we think about data, the way we think about regulation, the way we think about what's possible and what's legal and what's not allowed and what's desirable has been maturing since the early, I say the CMA was 2013, PSD2 was 2015. So all of these pieces have been maturing for the last 15 years. So the technical and regulatory component, I'd say, is pretty much there. And it's because it's there and mature and scalable, we can start thinking about different business models, because that's what makes banking as a service in general and embedded finance in particular really interesting, is that it allows you to do business differently. But that part is hard.
Yeah.
Looking at what you've historically done and using new tools from a technology perspective has been a really hard transition for the industry. And now we're saying, actually, you're going to be delivering new services in a new way and making money in a different way. And until you understand how that last piece fits together, it's very hard to know what your role in this new ecosystem is. And what I expect we will see in the next few years is players making that decision for themselves and saying, well, I'm gonna be the platform, or I'm gonna specialize in a narrow vertical. And that is no longer a technology problem. It's a business challenge.
Yeah. It's really interesting what you say about all sort of the existing infrastructures already being in place. I can't remember who exactly it was I was speaking to. I think it must have been at Money Live a couple of months ago, and they said that embedded finance didn't come from the pandemic. It was just exacerbated by it. So it's very interesting, a prediction, and I definitely think you're on the right track. You're definitely on the money. When I was doing a bit of research into 10x Banking, I saw that you really pioneer with your 10x Supercore. Can you tell us just a little bit about what that is and what it sets out to achieve?
You're going to have to stop me because this is my favorite topic to be talking about. So 10x Supercore is the sort of base 10x offering of how we solve the problem of what historically has been thought of as core banking. And I say what historically has been thought of as core banking because we used to think of core banking as this large, cumbersome, monolithic thing that cost a lot of money, was almost impossible to replace exactly because of the costs and risks, and it would be a sort of heavy infrastructure that you would only use a little bit of. So we're facing into this space and saying, actually, you don't need to think about it like that. We are able to be cloud native now because the cloud is here, mature, scaled, and with clear regulatory parameters of how you engage. So you start creating something that is much more robust than you've ever had before, but lighter of footprint that solves the problem of what connectivity and what infrastructure you need to run your bank. So 10x Supercore is how we solve that. There is a flavor of Supercore that we call Supercore Max that comes with a wrapper of additional services, and it's up to our clients to decide how much of it they need for their needs. I think there are three things that we feel very strongly about and Supercore is setting out to achieve. We believe that the dilemma that most banks historically face, and I don't just mean incumbents, I mean challengers as well, between scalability and reliability and security is a false one. And we set out to build technology that actually can scale to the degree and at the speed of your ambitions without compromising on the sort of scalability, robustness and reliability. We really want to completely remove that dilemma. The second piece is that, I've been saying it for years, it's beginning to catch on. Plumbing is really sexy. You want your plumbing to be not something you worry about, so that you can do anything that makes you different and successful and value additive to your customers on top of it. So I'd say that we look at the world and take a slightly different view from our competitors as to how much of that should be plumbing. We actually think there's quite a lot of what all banks do that is a utility, that is absolutely essential, but it's not where they add their differentiator. And that's the bit that we run. That's what Supercore does. We say for your digital ambitions, your ability for speed to market, speed to value, we will create an operating system that takes these worries away so you can focus resource, time, money, and creativity on what you build on top of it to make your business a success.
That's really interesting, and obviously this whole system is being powered by the fantastic access to talent that you have. I mean,
we have a good team.
You have a really good
we have a really good team.
Recovering bankers, was it that you put it out?
We have a lot of recovering bankers.
So if there's anybody that's going to know what needs to be done, obviously it's going to be 10x banking, right? In just going back to what you mentioned about the Supercore, you said it was cloud native. Now, you mentioned obviously the benefits of that sort of model, but how do you think that the incorporation of cloud technology is going to transform core banking models across the board?
It's a very good question. I'll give you my answer, but I need to confess that it's hope as well as belief. Okay. But they kind of live together, because if I didn't believe this was the future, I wouldn't be doing this for a living, right? I'd say that even 10 years ago, I remember sitting inside a bank. I worked in a bank, and our own leadership team saying, it will never catch on. The regulator will never permit it. And I think it's really important to start with that regulatory journey, because for financial services institutions, nobody will touch something that the regulator is unsure about. So actually, the way the regulator, particularly in the more mature environments like here, or Australia, or Singapore, where the regulator is really engaging with the right questions, you're seeing adoption pick up really, really quickly, because the players around the table know that the regulator won't retreat. That's the biggest worry that you see in some other jurisdiction. So with cloud particularly, and the regulators seeking to really understand, what does resilience look like on the cloud? What does robustness look like on the cloud? What are the things we need to be looking for? Because they're not the same as when you had your on-prem, your servers with a no-fly zone over them in rural Kentucky for one of the banks I worked for.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no fly zone over the servers. So the right questions are being asked, which is reassuring to the industry, and it's a sort of collective education where everyone's saying, if these are the things that the regulator needs to see, then I have the comfort that I don't need to work this out as I go, right? So I think the die is cast by the regulator in almost every jurisdiction that tends to be at the forefront of this. So the EEA, the UK, Australia, Singapore, and sort of a few others following. In that context, and with the clear parameters of what needs to be done, you get players such as ourselves coming in and saying we can actually very comfortably meet those standards, and by doing that, take away the reasons why someone 5 years ago might have hesitated to go into the cloud around security, etc. And then say, now that we have this robust, scalable, flexible architecture that reduces cost of ownership, slashes time to market, your core isn't actually the thing that holds you back. It's the thing that powers your capabilities. You say that to someone who has started working in finance 2 years ago, and they go, yeah. You say that to someone who was making decisions about their bank 10 years ago, and it's mind-blowing. And let me give you a very quick example if we have the time, right?
Of course.
When the pandemic started, almost every government passed provisions that allowed for payment holidays, particularly for mortgages, but also for other loans for both individuals and SMEs. If you have 10x, that change is a matter of minutes.
Oh, really?
To make the interest rate change, to make change in the payment schedules, and how many minutes depends on what governance you have around it. How many people need to check it, sign off, there's your workflow. But the thing is that the system is built to allow for that flexibility. Minutes. The equivalent for a bank on a traditional core, and I know that because I was working with one at the time, was 6 weeks of very long hours, including weekends, for a team of 12 COBOL developers.
Oh gosh, no thank you.
But that's the reality of it, right? So actually, if you have moved with this time, the flexibility is very, very real. And it's measured both in opportunity missed, the things you don't get to do because it takes you that long to make a shift, but also the flexibility you can have in your product configurations and your imagination. You could A/B test an idea, you could have a product idea that is evolving and morphing, and rather than spending 8 months designing it and 12 months building it, you can launch it and see how it behaves in the market. So to go back to your question, as we go down this journey, the art of the possible is really removing all of the biggest obstacles to what was holding banks back, which was fundamentally that the machinery couldn't take it. But if your plumbing is actually designed for this, then the only thing holding you back is your own imagination and creativity.
Well, that's it's been quite the transformation in terms of the relationship between the cloud and core banking models. You talked briefly in your answer about this sort of level of hesitation in adoption of cloud technology, and although you painted a very optimistic picture in the fact that it was being embraced by more people, do you think that there is still a level of hesitation that exists within the market? And why do you think that would be if it was so?
It's a very good question, and the answer is I would say there's always a little bit of hesitation, and I believe that takes two shapes. One is individual, personal. If you've been imagine being 25 years into your career, and everything you've learned as of the thing that takes you to the top is now being taken away from you, and it's a little bit of a leap into the unknown. If this is new for your organization, it takes a particular personality type to think that's a great idea, and it's a personality type you need right now. But I think there is a an understandable individual hesitation where the leaders being called upon to be the first in their organization to take a leap are nervous because they don't want to get it wrong, and there's a lot they don't know about this, particularly if they are in their 50s, 60s, have been doing this a long time. So I think there's an individual hesitation. The second bit of hesitation is not so much with adoption, particularly in a place like the UK, Australia, where the move is relentlessly towards cloud. It's not an if, but I think there is a little bit of hesitation a bit lower down the set of decisions, because we're saying that the new capabilities allow you to not carry things you don't need and to reimagine the things you do need so that they're better suited for purpose. But if you haven't spent the last 15 years learning what you keep and what you don't keep, what you take on the journey, what you change, what you don't change, is a set of daunting decisions. And I would expect, again, that teams might hesitate around that. My advice would be hire and partner with people who've done this before, who know how to solve for the things that you don't know about, and you focus on what makes your business good.
That's very, very interesting, and I mean, we shall see, hiring and partnering if it really drives forward the adoption to cloud. And I mean, on a personal level, I really agree with everything that you've said. Moving on, I think it would be a real shame not to finish on this question, but when I was doing my preparations for this interview, I came across the Fintech Power 50, who is obviously one of the main partners of this event. They described you as one of the big hitters in the financial industry right now. Thank you. And they really sort of highlighted this incredible career that you've had. I mean, how would you describe your career trajectory as, let's face it, an industry that's quite male-dominated?
Oh, yeah.
And secondly, what advice would you give to women who were thinking about going into the industry?
I think the fairest way of describing my career is accidental. Okay. I never dreamt of being in financial services. A lot of my university peers did, and I thought, what's wrong with you? And here I am. I fell into it, I must admit, at a time when I finished university in 2000 actually, and then by the time I finished my postgrad, early 2000s, it was impossible to do anything else. I tried, but everyone was going down this space, and then 5 minutes after I arrived into the industry, the crisis started, and I was like, what? What has happened is that I happened to be at the right place at the right time in a way that can't be replicated, and I'm very grateful for, because if you think about it, I came out of a PhD in the mid-2000s, and I sort of turned up in a bank pretty much as what we now described as the fintech wave started. And I had a front row seat from day one, and as the new technologies and new ways of working started emerging, the ecosystem that engaged with them from an incumbent, technologist, and regulator perspective, you could fit everyone in one room. So if you think about now, fintech is a huge industry. At the time, there was like 5 of us, and then it was 10, and then it was 100. But it was extremely lucky to have been there from a very early stage. And then the two things that help along that path is curiosity, because there's always new information coming your way. So actually, if you have the sort of personality that goes, if I ping it, will it go boing? This pace and this environment suits you. And the other thing that we don't talk about enough is that there is no light touch way of doing these jobs. It's an extremely intense industry. You need the work ethic of a machine, which I happen to have. So I have the curiosity, I have the work ethic, right place, right time. And I've had the most incredible journey over the last almost 20 years. I won't take away the hard work element. It's absolutely essential. But luck has played a huge part in being, at the right place at the right time. I would have described myself as a technophobe when I finished high school. No interest whatsoever. But I am a political scientist by background, and I found that as these technologies started coalescing, the things that really started changing are actually economic models, socio-economic structures, and the tech is the enabler. So you absolutely need to understand the tech to understand its potential impact. But it was the impact that drew me to it, and now I'm hooked. Now, the second part of your question is trickier because I was the only woman in the room when I started, and I remain the only woman in most rooms I walk into. Particularly on the business and tech side of the divide. So you see women in the business, but they tend to be in other functions. It's not changing fast enough. And I think one of the biggest challenges that our diversity efforts as an industry entail is that diversity has become an activity, an initiative, and the quality of conversation that we have around what makes it hard is too abstract. Because the reality is, if we're trying to be constructive and positive about nobody will talk about diversity as anything but a good thing, right? But unless you talk about the experience of exclusion, you don't know what you're solving for. And if you talk about the experience of exclusion, you can stop treating inequality as a victimless crime, because people start talking about it affects them. But if you talk about how it affects people, who's the perpetrator? And I think one of the biggest challenges we have is that we try to have a positive and constructive dialogue that's staying away from the specifics, because we don't want to be pointing any fingers, and that's right. But at the same time, until we start solving it in the specifics, until we start sensitizing everyone as to what discrimination looks like, what a microaggression looks like, we're not going to make it better. I don't see enough of that happening. It's happening more and more. I will definitely see that younger generations are much more sensitized. I see a younger heterosexual white man stopping a conversation in its tracks that may have been invisible to his father, and that gives me a lot of hope. My advice to young women is bloody do it, we need you.
Well, Leda, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, and I wish we could speak together all day. I mean, it's been really, really fascinating.
Nice meeting you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and yeah, I hope to see you again at the rest of the
event. I'm sure you will.
We'll run into each other somewhere.
You will.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.